In theory, a cruise is an amazing, relaxing time full of sunshine, good memories, and entertainment. Unfortunately, however, this dream of paradise can very quickly turn to an absolute nightmare. I mean, just think about the Titanic. We all know what could happen. From power outages to broken engines, all the way to striking a rock. On today's top 10 list, I'm going to be covering some dark things that happened on a cruise ship. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have this lost dialysis machine. In 2012, a woman was checking in for her cruise that was off to Jamaica. God, how much would I love to be going on that cruise right now. As she's going through this process, however, she was informed by the cruise line that they were unable to find her portable dialysis machine. This, of course, is a huge problem as this person needed nightly dialysis, and I can't imagine a machine like that would come cheap. To make matters worse, she was then escorted off of the ship without any kind of explanation, and the ship sailed off. She wasn't on the ship, but all of her luggage was, and also most likely the machine that had been misplaced. The cruise line, of course, ended up refunding her ticket, and they also gave her credit for a future cruise, but I'm not exactly sure if she would want to give that company another shot or not. I'm not exactly sure how long it took for her to get her luggage back, or if she was ever able to recover that machine. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Viking Sky Cruise ship. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. In March of 2019, the Viking Sky Cruise ship was off the coast of Norway when the weather got very stormy and the waters began to get really rough, so the ship was actually stranded. The boat was carrying 1,300 people and the passengers began getting airlifted off of the ship, but some had to wait for over 24 hours in order to be able to be rescued. Of course, air was the only way for them to get help because of the conditions of the water. It wasn't safe for any boat to be traveling through. One passenger told the news that the waves were so bad at one point they actually broke a door and passengers were getting thrown around the room. Once the conditions improved, the captain was able to get the ship to a dock where everyone was able to get to safety. There were videos taken by passengers that showed water actually inside the ship, which must have been so scary. People also said that the waves were up to 30 feet high, which I just can't even imagine. I am so glad that everyone was okay after this undoubtedly scary day. In our number 8 spot today, we have the MSC Opera. In June of 2019, the MSC Opera was in Venice, Italy, when it actually crashed into another small boat called the River Countess. Apparently something happened and the engines had got stuck, which is what apparently caused the accident. This, of course, could have been pretty catastrophic, as an accident like this could not only cause a ton of damages, but also could have been extremely fateful. But in a very fortunate turn of events, everyone walked away from the incident. The opera boat had some scratches that needed to be fixed, of course, as well as the malfunctioning engine. The River Countess was a little bit more banged up in the accident, but nothing too crazy. And only 5 people were injured in this accident, and it is said that none of them were serious, which is just the best news. In our number 7 spot today, we have Carnival Cruise Line's Triumph. Carnival Cruise Line's Triumph, which is now called Sunrise, was dubbed as the Poop Cruise, and for a very good and disgusting reason. There was a generator fire on board the ship which caused a whole world of trouble. The fire left the entire ship without power, which unfortunately meant no working bathrooms. Passengers were asked to do their business in hazardous waste bags and to throw them into the garbages on deck. But of course, this is only a temporary solution that truly isn't ideal and one that would not last long. Considering the fact that it took the ship 4 whole days to be towed back from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to Alabama, you can only imagine how awful those days must have been. Passengers have described there being more than 2 inches of sewage covering the ground, which I think may have turned me off from cruises forever. 31 passengers later sued for the long-lasting damages, some of them citing PTSD. 27 of these people received $118,000 for them to split, which I don't think was worth all of the fuss of them even suing in the first place. In our number 6 spot today, we have Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas. In 2014, Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas was traveling from New Jersey to the Caribbean when it experienced some troubled waters. I don't mean that literally as in the water, I'm talking more about what happened on board. Cruise ships are known to be a place where viruses spread like wildfire, but this was one of the worst cases we have ever seen. The ship at one point was carrying more sick people than any other boat had ever been carrying since the Center for Disease Control and Prevention began keeping track more than 20 years ago. That most definitely is not a record one would want to hold. At one point, there were apparently 700 passengers who were sick at the same time. Apparently, most of the illnesses contracted on a cruise ship are the result of a norovirus that causes inflammation in the stomach and large intestines. I am just really glad that this terrible outbreak was not coupled with the power outage that the Triumph boat that we talked about before experienced, because that would have been tragic. In our number 5 spot today, we have Carnival Cruise Line's Splendor. Carnival Cruise Line's Splendor had a similar issue to Triumph's. In November of 2010, the ship was stranded in the Pacific Ocean after engine fires caused the ship to lose power. There were 4,500 passengers on board at the time, so this situation was dire. The ship ended up being towed by tugboat back to San Diego, but the passengers were left without power for air conditioning or refrigeration the whole time. The US Navy actually had to airlift in rations for passengers so that they would have something to eat. Luckily, the boat arrived back safely and no passengers were injured. All of the passengers received refunds for their tickets and travel, and they also received vouchers that could be redeemed for a future cruise with the company. In our number 4 spot today, we have the MTS OCEANOS. The MTS OCEANOS was built by a French company and set out in 1952, but it ended up being purchased by a Greek company in 1976. In 1991, the ship set out for South Africa, led by Captain Yanis Avranas. Because I don't speak sailing, this means nothing to me, but for those of you who understand, the ship was headed into 40-knot winds and 30-foot swells. I assume this is not ideal, as the usual outdoor parties were transferred inside for the time being. The weather conditions ended up worsening that night, and the ship was really rolling from side to side, which is not a good sign. Because of the lack of repairs on the waste disposal system, there ended up being an explosion that led to the ship losing power, and water began filling the generator room, which is never a good sign. Since the generators were down, the ship was simply just adrift, which is truly a nightmare. Of course, a distress call was sent and a bunch of helicopters from South Africa came to the rescue. In a strange and surprising turn of events, the captain and a lot of crew members were the first to be saved from the ship, which left the entertainment staff, who do not get paid enough, to coordinate all of the passengers and the rescue efforts. All 571 people who were on board the ship ended up being rescued, which is the happy ending that we all needed, and the ship ended up sinking nose first into the sea. In our number 3 spot today, we have the SEABOURN Spirits. In 2005, the SEABOURN Spirits, which is a small cruise ship, was about 100 miles from the coast of Somalia when pirates in speedboats came up and began attacking. The pirates had machine guns they were firing, as well as rocket-propelled grenades, which is insane. The captain was obviously a very quick thinker, as he managed to change the course of the ship and actually was able to get away, which is just so amazing. There were 300 passengers on board, and miraculously, none of them got hurt, which is just the best news. The ship ended up making it all of the way to Seychelles, where everyone could be safe and the damage that the boat had taken could be repaired. I can't imagine how scary this must have been and how stressed that captain would have been, but I am very glad this ended off on a positive note. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Norwegian Dawn. In April of 2005, the Norwegian Dawn was sailing through some extremely rough weather off of the coast of Georgia. The ship was encountering waves that went as high as 70 feet. The third extremely large wave that came crashing down on the boat ended up smashing several windows on the ship, which resulted in the flooding of at least 62 cabins. Unfortunately, there wasn't much that could be done until the storm had passed, but of course, most of the passengers chose to get off the boat as early as they could once it became possible. There were only 4 passengers who ended up being injured, none of which were severe. The damage to the boat wasn't extremely extensive, so they were able to repair it, which is great news. In our number one spot today, we have the Costa Concordia. The Costa Concordia was a huge ship with 17 decks, 6 restaurants, and a 3-story theater. The ship was big enough to hold a whopping 4,200 passengers, so there were a lot of people on this boat on January 13th, 2012. On that day, the boat's captain wanted to sail a little closer to the island of Isola del Giglio than he normally would so that he could impress and salute the residents. He turned off the ship's alarm for the computer navigation system, which turned out to be just as terrible of an idea as you would think it is. He thought he knew the waters well enough to navigate by sight, but when the ship struck an underwater rock, things took a deadly turn. The ship capsized and sank, which unfortunately ended up taking the lives of some of the passengers on board. The captain, who was responsible for the accident in the first place, made one more awful mistake when he abandoned ship while passengers were still stuck on board. Every captain knows that this is a huge faux pas. The recovery for this ship was the largest of its kind, as the huge ship had been entirely dismantled. The captain ended up being sentenced to jail for manslaughter. He of course appealed this decision multiple times, but in 2017, he began serving his 16-year sentence. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. If you've ever been on a cruise and something crazy happened, please let me know in the comments because I would love to know. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlovsky, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Starting off at our number 10 spot, why did I say that? I've never said that before. It just came out of my mouth like that. In March of 2019, the Viking why is Sky Cruise so hard for me to say? Apparently something happened and the Edgens, that's how I just said that. I don't know if you heard that when I looked down. There's a plastic bag beside me and a ghost touched it, I think. The fire left the engine ship. That's not even the word at all. Reading is hard. I hope everyone remembers what happened on the Triumph 2 points ago. Carnival Cruise Line Splendor had a similar issue to Triumph's that we talked about earlier in this list, like I just said. Carnival Cruise Line's Splendor had a similar
Seychelles.
I said it right!